Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a massive, dense 90-minute course from API Sec University on the OWASP API Security Top 10, and we're going to distill it right down into actionable, visual insights. Look, if you build, defend, or even attack web applications, you already know that APIs are literally the engine of the modern internet. But as we're about to see, that engine has some pretty serious design flaws. We're going to break down these complex threats so you can actually understand and, more importantly, mitigate them.
To really understand the immense stakes we're dealing with here, just consider this number, 114 million. According to Akamai, that is the number of API attacks recorded in a single day back in 2021. I mean, the sheer volume of automated targeted attacks hitting APIs around the globe is absolutely staggering, and you better believe it's only climbing as the financial stakes get higher.
So the crucial point is this. For decades, organizations built giant, expensive castle walls. Firewalls, complex network perimeters, the classic MITRE kill chain defenses. But public internet-facing APIs, they essentially punch a hole right through those walls. Attackers don't need to sneak into the network and pivot around to find a database anymore. They can just walk right up to the front door, ask the API for the data, and if it's insecure, the API just hands it over.
To make sense of all this, we'll follow a quick roadmap. First, the API security crisis. Second, the 2023 OWASP SIFT. Third, the authorization battleground. Fourth, architecture and external risks. And finally, beyond the top 10.
Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the API security crisis.
So how did we get here? Well, the API market grew by 20 times in just a decade. It was like wildfire. Businesses suddenly didn't need to build custom software for things like maps or payment processing. They could just plug in and share functionality via APIs. But in that massive global rush, security was basically treated as an afterthought. Compounding the whole issue, legacy vulnerability scanners and enterprise tools completely failed to detect unique API logic flaws. Because of that, APIs quickly became the leading attack vector, offering direct access to sensitive data without any need for complex network pivoting.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 2023 OWASP Shift.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the threat landscape has really matured. When we look at the shift from the 2019 to the 2023 OWASP standard, classic web app threats like injection actually dropped off the list entirely. Now, it's not that SQL injections just magically disappeared, but web application firewalls have actually gotten really good at stopping them. Instead, we're seeing the rise of highly complex threats like server-side request forgery and the unsafe consumption of third-party APIs. Essentially, the attackers have leveled up.
Now let's be honest, staring at a rigid list of 10 technical vulnerabilities can make anyone's eyes glaze over. So to make this memorable, we're grouping the OWASP list into 3 core conceptual buckets. First, who are you, which covers the authorization crisis. Second, how is it built, covering architecture and external risks. And finally, who is connecting, which takes us beyond the top 10.
Let's start with Section 3, the authorization battleground.
We're kicking off with the largest and most critical bucket. The undisputed heavyweight champion of API vulnerabilities is Broken Object Level Authorization, or BOLA. BOLA happens when an API checks if you are logged in, but fundamentally fails to check if you actually have permission to view the specific data you're asking for. It is the most prevalent, impactful vulnerability on the list, and what's really terrifying is that automated security scanners almost always miss it, because to them, the requests look completely legitimate.
Now, what's really interesting about this is just how simple the exploit can be. Imagine a user named Bruce logs in. The API gives him his data at a URL ending in ID 2727. BOLA occurs if Bruce simply changes that number in his browser to 2728, and boom, the API hands over the medical records for Harvey Dent. Because Bruce is technically an authenticated user, the API just blindly trusts the request. It's a devastatingly simple manipulation.
But this authorization crisis extends way beyond just viewing data. Take broken function level authorization, or BFLA. This is all about hijacking actions. Think of a regular user guessing the URL to an admin endpoint and actually successfully transferring funds. Then you have broken object property level authorization, or BOPLA, which combines excessive data exposure with mass assignment. This is where an attacker sneaks extra parameters into a request, like adding isAdmin true during account creation, and the API thoughtlessly applies that property straight to the database. No questions asked.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 4, Architecture and External Risks.
This bucket is all about how the API is built and exposed to the outside world. There are 2 massive structural threats we need to highlight here. First is improper inventory management.
Organizations will lock down their shiny new version 3 API, but totally leave a vulnerable, unpatched beta or version 1 API running in the background. It just gives attackers a forgotten backdoor. Second is unrestricted access to sensitive business flows. This one isn't even about hacking data, it's about hacking logic. Think of scalper bots instantly draining the entire stock of PS5s the very second they go online, just by automating the purchase flow way faster than any human ever could.
To combat these architectural abuses, specifically unrestricted resource consumption, developers absolutely must implement strict guardrails. It's a straightforward step-by-step process. Step 1, limit execution timeouts and allocable memory. Step 2, strictly enforce maximum payload sizes and array lengths. And Step 3, add robust server-side validation. If you don't do this, attackers can effortlessly trigger a denial of service or cause your cloud infrastructure costs to absolutely skyrocket by forcing your systems to infinitely scale.
There's another major architectural risk that is rapidly rising, and that's server-side request forgery, or SSRF. Modern web development actively encourages APIs to fetch data from URLs provided by users. But if that input isn't properly sanitized, an attacker can supply a URL that literally forces the API's server to probe its own internal secure network. They're essentially using your API as a proxy to bypass your firewalls and steal internal data.
Finally, we reach Section 5, beyond the top 10.
These overarching flaws really tie all these specific vulnerabilities into one catastrophic theme: a profound lack of verification. Business logic vulnerabilities exploit the exact intended features of your application. Because they manipulate the unique custom rules of your specific business, there's absolutely no automated scanner on the market that can catch them. To a security tool, an attack exploiting a business logic flaw just looks like normal, legitimate traffic following the rules. It's just doing so in a maliciously clever way that the developers never anticipated.
A perfect cautionary tale for this is the 2021 Experian Partner API leak. Experian gave a trusted partner authorized access to their API for credit checks. Makes sense, right? But that partner poorly implemented it on their own public web app. Because Experian implicitly trusted the partner system, anyone on the internet who intercepted that web traffic could input just a name and an address and instantly pull a full credit score. It was a massive, real-world failure of implicit trust between integrated systems.
Renowned security expert Bruce Schneier really hit the nail on the head when he said, "The future of digital systems is complexity, and complexity is the worst enemy of security." Every single time you add a new third-party API integration or every time you roll out a new feature, you are multiplying your hidden attack surfaces.
So, I really want you to ask yourself this direct question. Are you depending on implicit trust as a security control? Are you just assuming your users will follow the rules? Are you assuming the data coming from a third-party partner API is inherently safe? Because as this entire OWASP list proves, trust is simply not a security protocol.
The only technical takeaway that comprehensively addresses this is adopting a zero-trust architecture across all your API layers. You must never trust user input. You must fiercely validate any data coming from third-party APIs. You have to explicitly enforce authorization checks on every single function, on every single object, and on every single request. And please, for the love of everything, retire and delete your old orphaned endpoints.
I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Attackers are smart, but they're also looking for the easiest way in. With traditional network perimeters hardening up, APIs are just sitting right there in the open. If you don't shift your focus to rigorous authorization, inventory management, and zero-trust logic, will your APIs be the path of least resistance for the next major data breach? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep those endpoints secure.